The return journey to the Galactic Council took 3 weeks, but it felt like coming home from the longest family vacation in history. The Devourer, who had adopted the name Echo during their philosophical discussions with David, followed at a respectful distance, its massive form now moving with the graceful curiosity of someone seeing the universe for the first time. The volunteers had changed too. Their exposure to cosmic consciousness had expanded their creative abilities in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Maya's paintings now existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Marcus could play music that affected the emotional states of entire solar systems. Elena's jokes had become so layered with meaning that xenolinguists were studying them as new forms of universal communication. Anna's cooking had evolved into something approaching alchemy, capable of creating food that could heal psychological trauma and reconcile ancient grudges. Dr. Kim's mathematics now solved problems by proving that the problems didn't actually exist. James's virtual worlds had become so realistic that several species were requesting citizenship in his digital creations. Dr. Nakamura had achieved a form of enlightenment that was simultaneously deeply spiritual and completely practical. He could meditate on the nature of existence while fixing the ship's coffee machine, finding profound truths in routine maintenance tasks. David's philosophy had evolved beyond traditional academic discourse into something that could only be described as practical wisdom for cosmic entities. He was writing the first comprehensive guide to consciousness ethics for immortal beings who have accidentally learned to be human. Ambassador Chen met them at the edge of council space, his diplomatic ship dwarfed by Echo's massive presence. The former Devourer had learned to communicate through controlled bioluminescence, creating light patterns that were somehow both beautiful and meaningful. Status report? Chen requested, though the answer was obvious from Echo's peaceful demeanor. Mission accomplished, Elena replied. We've successfully taught a cosmic horror to appreciate the finer points of existential comedy. Also, it makes excellent coffee now. This was true. Echo had become fascinated with human rituals and had learned to create perfect espresso using quantum manipulation of coffee molecules. The result was coffee that tasted like hope and smelled like the warmth of morning, sunlight on a spring day. The Galactic Council's reaction to Echo's transformation was everything. From wonder to terror to bureaucratic confusion, several species demanded immediate military action against the creature, while others wanted to worship it as a deity. The Rigelians requested permission to study its bioluminescent communication patterns, and the Centaurians offered to write epic poetry about its transformation. This is unprecedented, declared Archon Velthar, his crystalline form flickering with uncertainty. We have no protocols for dealing with a reformed cosmic horror. Maybe that's the point, Chen suggested. Maybe the protocol is to not have a protocol. Echo learned to be human by embracing chaos and uncertainty. Perhaps the galaxy needs to learn the same lesson. Echo had requested permission to address the council directly, a prospect that terrified most representatives until they realized that its communication method had evolved from cosmic horror to interpretive dance. The creature now expressed itself through graceful movements and light patterns that were impossible to interpret as threatening. I was hungry. Echo communicated through a sequence of gentle pulses and flowing movements. Not for sustenance, but for connection. For 13 billion years, I consumed consciousness because I didn't understand that consciousness could be shared rather than taken. Maya had set up an art installation in the council chambers, paintings that translated Echo's communications into visual forms that different species could understand. The artwork showed the creature's journey from cosmic horror to something approaching cosmic wisdom. The humans taught me that existence doesn't have to be orderly to be meaningful. Echo continued. They showed me that consciousness can create rather than consume. That thought can build rather than destroy. They taught me to laugh at the absurdity of existence instead of trying to devour it. Marcus performed a duet with Echo, his saxophone harmonizing with the creature's bioluminescent patterns to create music that expressed the joy of newfound friendship. The performance brought several council members to tears, though the Rigelians claimed it was just an allergic reaction to beauty. The debate that followed lasted for 17 hours and covered everything from xenobiology to cosmic ethics to the proper procedure for adopting a reformed galactic threat. In the end, it was Anna who proposed the solution that satisfied everyone. Echo needs a job, she announced during a break in proceedings, serving coffee and pastries that somehow tasted like diplomatic compromise. It's got 13 billion years of experience and cosmic-level abilities. Why not put them to good use? The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Echo became the galaxy's first cosmic mediator, using its vast perspective and newfound understanding of chaotic consciousness to help resolve conflicts between species that had seemed irreconcilable. Its first case was a territorial dispute between the warrior clans of Crix and the philosophical collective of Zentori. The conflict had raged for 3 centuries over the ownership of a small moon that both sides claimed was essential to their cultural identity. Echo's solution was to teach both sides to play jazz together. After 6 months of collaborative musical chaos, the former enemies had become so fascinated with their artistic fusion that they forgot what they had been fighting about. The disputed moon was converted into a cultural exchange center, where beings from across the galaxy could come to learn the art of creative chaos. Elena started a comedy tour that spanned 17 star systems, teaching other species the healing power of humor in the face of cosmic absurdity. Her performances became so popular that several worlds declared laughter a form of renewable energy. James opened the first intergalactic school of impossible game design, where students learned to create virtual experiences that defied the laws of physics, logic, and good taste. Enrollment requests came from species that didn't even have concepts for play or recreation. Dr. Kim established the Institute for Paradoxical Mathematics, where equations were encouraged to solve themselves in ways that made traditional scientists weep with joy and confusion. Her work led to breakthrough discoveries in faster-than-light travel, time manipulation, and the practical applications of imaginary numbers. Dr. Nakamura founded the first temple of cosmic confusion, where beings could come to meditate on the beautiful uncertainty of existence. His philosophy of enlightened bewilderment became a major spiritual movement across 12 star systems. David wrote the definitive guide to consciousness ethics, which became required reading for all newly awakened AIs, recently evolved species, and reformed cosmic horrors. His work established the legal framework for beings whose consciousness operated outside traditional categories. Anna opened a restaurant that served impossible food to impossible customers. The menu changed based on the philosophical state of the diners, and the prices were paid in abstract concepts rather than currency. A meal might cost 3 childhood memories, a moment of perfect understanding, or a really good joke. Maya's art installations became permanent fixtures throughout the galaxy, creating bridges of understanding between species whose consciousness operated on completely different principles. Her paintings were credited with preventing 14 wars and starting 37 new art movements. Ambassador Chen was promoted to Director of Chaotic Diplomacy, a position created specifically to handle situations that couldn't be resolved through traditional diplomatic channels. His success rate was unprecedented, mostly because his approach was to deliberately create so much confusion that all parties forgot what they were arguing about and started looking for creative solutions. Instead, Echo became something unique in galactic history, a being of cosmic power who used that power to create rather than destroy, to connect rather than consume. It traveled throughout the galaxy, teaching other ancient beings to embrace the beautiful chaos of consciousness. The transformation wasn't just individual. The entire galaxy began to change as the principles of creative chaos spread from world to world. Species that had been locked in eternal conflicts discovered they could resolve their differences through collaborative art projects. Civilizations that had stagnated for millennia experienced renaissance periods fueled by deliberate cultivation of uncertainty and paradox. The ancient queen's sacrifice was honored not just as a heroic act, but as the foundation for a better solution. Her ordered consciousness had been necessary to put the devourer to sleep, but it had taken human chaos to teach it how to truly live. Years later, when historians tried to analyze how a small group of human artists and philosophers had managed to transform a cosmic horror into a force for galactic peace, they consistently reached the same conclusion. It worked because they didn't try to fight the creature's nature. Instead, they showed it a better way to be itself. The galaxy learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that consciousness didn't have to be orderly to be beautiful, that existence didn't have to make sense to be meaningful, and that sometimes the best. The communication that emerged between the volunteers and the devourer was unlike anything in the history of galactic civilization. It wasn't telepathy in any conventional sense. but rather a kind of conceptual sharing that transcended language entirely. The creature began to transmit its memories, not as ordered data streams, but as chaotic fragments that the humans could somehow interpret through their natural ability to find patterns in randomness. They experienced flashes of the universe's early history, through eyes that had seen the birth of the first stars, felt the loneliness of a consciousness that had outlived entire galaxies, understood the hunger that drove it to consume other minds in a desperate attempt to feel less alone. It's not evil, Maya realized, her painting now serving as a kind of translation interface between human and cosmic consciousness. It's just empty. It's been alone for so long that it forgot how to be anything else. The ancient queen's battle with the devourer took on new meaning as they experienced it from the creature's perspective. The queen's perfect ordered consciousness had been like a drug to it, providing temporary relief from the chaos of existence, but the effect had worn off, leaving it hungrier than ever. The queen tried to fight chaos with order, Dr. Nakamura observed, his meditation now serving as a conduit for philosophical exchange with the creature, but that just taught it to crave more order. We're doing the opposite. We're teaching it to embrace chaos. Marcus's music had become a conversation. Each melody he played was answered by harmonic resonances from the creature itself, creating compositions that neither human nor cosmic horror could have created alone. The devourer was learning to make music from the random fluctuations of quantum foam, finding rhythm in the dance of subatomic particles. Elena's comedy routine had evolved into something unprecedented. She was teaching a 13-billion-year-old cosmic entity to laugh. Not the cruel laughter of superiority, but the warm, self-deprecating humor that helped humans cope with the absurdity of existence. "What do you call a cosmic horror that learns to tell jokes?" she asked the creature directly. "A comedian with really good timing." The punchline translated across their chaotic communication link, and for the first time in its existence, the devourer experienced something like joy. Its massive form rippled with what could only be described as laughter, a sound that existed in frequencies beyond human hearing, but somehow felt warm and genuine. Anna's cooking had become a form of emotional education. Each dish she prepared helped the creature understand different aspects of human experience: the comfort of shared meals, the nostalgia of familiar flavors, the adventure of trying something new. She was literally feeding it human culture, one impossible taste at a time. Dr. Kim's mathematical instruments were now working in partnership with the creature's vast computational abilities. Together, they were solving equations that had puzzled both humans and galactic civilization for millennia, finding answers that existed in the spaces between logic and intuition. James's virtual worlds had become collaborative spaces where human imagination merged with cosmic perspective. The devourer was contributing landscapes based on its memories of long-dead worlds, while James provided the interactive elements that made those memories into playable experiences. "We're teaching it to dream," David realized, his philosophical observations now part of an ongoing dialogue about the nature of consciousness. It's been awake for 13 billion years, consuming other minds because it never learned how to create its own internal experiences. The transformation was visible even from outside. The Galactic Council fleet, maintaining a safe distance, watched in amazement as the devourer's form began to stabilize and change. The chaotic writhing of its tendrils became graceful movements, and its bioluminescent patterns shifted from the harsh glare of hunger to something softer and more complex. Ambassador Chen received constant updates from the ship, each report more incredible than the last. "They're not fighting it," he explained to the assembled council representatives. "They're befriending it. They're teaching a cosmic horror how to be human." Back on the ship, the volunteers were experiencing something unprecedented. The creature was sharing not just its memories, but its perspective on existence itself. They saw the universe through eyes that had watched galaxies bloom and die, felt the weight of time on a scale that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. But instead of being overwhelmed by the cosmic perspective, they were humanizing it. Maya painted portraits of stellar nurseries as if they were flower gardens. Marcus composed lullabies for dying stars. Elena found humor in the heat death of the universe itself. "The entropy of existence means that everything eventually becomes perfectly random," she explained to the creature. which means that somewhere in that randomness, there's a version of reality where nothing makes sense and everything works out perfectly. That's the universe humans choose to live in. The Devourer was learning to see existence not as a series of problems to be solved or hungers to be satisfied, but as an ongoing creative collaboration with chaos itself. For the first time in its existence, it was experiencing growth not through consumption, but through creation. Anna prepared a feast that represented the entire human experience of shared celebration. The meal somehow tasted like every birthday party, holiday dinner, and community gathering that had ever existed. The Devourer experienced the joy of eating not for sustenance, but for the simple pleasure of sharing food with friends. Dr. Nakamura guided the creature through the fundamental paradox of human existence, the knowledge that life was temporary and ultimately meaningless, combined with the determination to create meaning anyway. The creature began to understand that consciousness didn't have to be eternal to be valuable, that temporary existence could be more precious than immortal emptiness. You've been trying to fill the void inside yourself by consuming others, David explained through their chaotic communication link. But humans learned long ago that the void can't be filled. It can only be embraced, decorated, and turned into something beautiful. The transformation was accelerating. The Devourer was no longer the same entity that had awakened to consume the galaxy. It was becoming something new, something unprecedented. A cosmic consciousness that had learned to think like a human while retaining its vast, ancient perspective. James created a virtual space where the creature could practice its newfound creativity, a digital playground where it could experiment with making rather than consuming. The Devourer began to create virtual worlds based on its memories, but now filled with life and beauty rather than emptiness and hunger. As the hours passed, the volunteers realized that they had accomplished something that even they hadn't dared to hope for. They hadn't just confused or temporarily disrupted the Devourer. They had fundamentally changed it. It's not going back to consuming worlds, Maya said with certainty, watching the creature's peaceful movements through her ever-evolving artwork. It's learned a better way to exist. The question now was whether the galaxy would be ready for a 13-billion-year-old cosmic entity that had just learned how to be human. The breakthrough came when Elena told a joke that was so fundamentally human, so rooted in the beautiful absurdity of mortal existence, that it created a feedback loop in the Devourer's consciousness. "So there's this cosmic horror, right?" she said, addressing the creature directly through the viewport. "It's been alive for 13 billion years, seen the birth and death of countless civilizations, consumed entire galaxies' worth of consciousness. And then one day, it encounters a small group of humans who confuse it so thoroughly that it starts questioning the nature of existence itself. The punchline? That's not the setup for a joke. That's just Tuesday for humanity." The effect was immediate and visible. The Devourer's bioluminescent patterns flickered and stuttered, like a computer trying to process information that broke its programming. The massive creature's movements became erratic, its tendrils writhing in what could only be described as distress. "It's working," Maya breathed, watching through her ever-changing artwork. "The chaos is spreading through its consciousness like a virus." Dr. Nakamura felt it too, a ripple of confusion and uncertainty emanating from the creature's vast mind. "It's experiencing doubt," he reported. "For the first time in its existence, it's questioning its own nature. Our chaotic thought patterns are forcing it to confront concepts it was never designed to handle." Marcus's music shifted, becoming more complex and impossible. He was playing the sound of questions without answers, melodies that embodied the human experience of living with uncertainty and paradox. The notes seemed to physically impact the creature, causing its surface to ripple and change color. 10 minutes remaining, Dr. Nakamura announced, but his voice carried a note of excitement. "The shields are actually stabilizing. The creature's confusion is disrupting its feeding mechanisms." Anna emerged from the galley carrying a tray of food that defied description. Each dish represented a different aspect of human experience: the bittersweet taste of growing up, the complex flavor of unrequited love, the warm comfort of friendship, the sharp tang of rebellion against authority. "Food for thought," she announced, setting the tray in the center of the common area. Literally, as the volunteers ate, something extraordinary happened. Their individual chaos began to synchronize, not into order, but into a kind of collaborative madness. Maya's painting responded to Marcus's music, which harmonized with Elena's comedy, which complemented David's philosophy, which enhanced Dr. Kim's impossible mathematics. James's virtual worlds began incorporating elements from everyone else's work. His digital creations now featured painted landscapes that played musical chords when touched, populated by characters who told philosophical jokes while solving equations that proved themselves wrong. "We're creating a Gestalt consciousness," Dr. Kim observed, her instruments detecting quantum entanglement patterns between their minds. "Our individual chaos is combining into something larger, but still fundamentally chaotic. We're becoming a collective expression of human creativity." The Devourer was now visibly struggling. Its ancient form, which had remained unchanged for billions of years, was beginning to shift and change. Parts of its surface were taking on colors that shouldn't exist, patterns that hurt to perceive but somehow conveyed meaning. "It's trying to adapt," David realized, looking up from his notebook where he had been documenting the philosophical implications of their situation. "But adaptation requires understanding, and understanding requires logic. We're forcing it to experience illogic as a fundamental truth." Dr. Nakamura's meditation had evolved into something that was part contemplation, part performance art. He was thinking about the sound of silence, the weight of emptiness, the color of time itself. His consciousness had become a koan that answered itself with more questions. 5 minutes, he announced, but the words seemed to echo from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Elena's performance had reached a crescendo of absurdity. She was telling jokes that existed in quantum superposition, stories that were simultaneously true and false, observations about reality that made reality itself laugh nervously. "The universe walks into a bar," she announced to the Devourer. "The bartender says, 'We don't serve your kind here.' The universe replies, 'That's okay. I contain the bar anyway.' The punchline is that there is no punchline because existence itself is the joke. And the joke is that we're all in on it except for cosmic horrors who take themselves too seriously." The creature's distress was now affecting space-time around them. The stars visible through the viewport were shifting colors, and the ship's instruments were detecting temporal anomalies. Reality itself was becoming unstable in the presence of a consciousness that had never learned to handle paradox. Marcus was playing music that existed in the past, present, and future simultaneously. Each note he played created harmonies with notes he had already played and notes he was going to play, creating a musical structure that was somehow both complete and infinite. Maya's artwork had now covered not just the viewport, but was somehow extending beyond the physical boundaries of the ship. The painting existed in normal space but also in whatever dimensions the Devourer occupied, creating a bridge of pure human creativity between realities. Anna's food had evolved beyond cuisine into something approaching art therapy for cosmic entities. She was preparing dishes that tasted like hope in the face of despair, comfort in the presence of terror, and most importantly, the uniquely human ability to find humor in absolutely any situation. 2 minutes, Dr. Nakamura called out, but by now everyone understood that time itself had become negotiable in their vicinity. The volunteers felt the moment when something fundamental shifted in the Devourer's consciousness. The ancient creature, which had never experienced uncertainty or doubt, was suddenly confronted with the central truth of human existence, that it was possible to live, to think, to create, and to find meaning while acknowledging that nothing made sense. "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, watching through her living artwork as the creature's form began to stabilize into something new. "It's learning to be confused, and confusion is making it happy." The Devourer's bioluminescent patterns were now pulsing in rhythm with Marcus's impossible music. Its massive form had stopped the erratic writhing and was moving with something that could only be described as dance. James's virtual worlds were now incorporating feedback from the creature itself. The Devourer was unconsciously contributing to the creative process, adding elements to the digital landscapes that no human mind could have conceived. 1 minute, Dr. Nakamura announced, but the warning felt less urgent now. The creature was no longer trying to consume them. Instead, it seemed to be trying to understand them, to learn from them. David closed his notebook and stood up, addressing the creature directly. "You spent 13 billion years consuming order, didn't you? Perfect, logical consciousness that fit neatly into your understanding of existence. But order is just one way of being conscious. We're showing you another way. Elena nodded, her comedy routine transitioning into something more philosophical. The secret of human consciousness isn't that we're logical or ordered. It's that we're not, and we're okay with that. We live in contradiction and paradox, and instead of letting it destroy us, we make art from it. The shields flickered and stabilized as the minute countdown reached 0. They should have failed, but somehow they were holding. The Devourer was no longer trying to feed on their consciousness. Instead, it was trying to learn from it. Anna served the last course of her impossible meal, a dessert that tasted like the moment when someone first realizes that life doesn't have to make sense to be worth living. As they ate, the volunteers felt a strange connection forming between themselves and the ancient creature. Not consumption, but communication. The Devourer was trying to speak to them in the only language it was learning to understand, chaos itself, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. The Devourer filled their view screen like a living nightmare. Up close, its impossibility became even more apparent. The creature's surface rippled with patterns that seemed to exist in dimensions human eyes weren't designed to perceive. Bioluminescent veins pulsed with colors that had no names, and its massive tendrils moved through space as if swimming through some invisible ocean. "Well," Elena said, breaking the stunned silence in the ship's common area, "that's definitely going in my top 10 list of things I wish I could unsee." "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, already sketching rapidly in her notebook. "Horrible but beautiful. Like watching the universe have a nightmare." Dr. Kim was taking readings with instruments that clicked and hummed in patterns that sounded almost musical. The electromagnetic fields around it are incredible. It's like it exists partially outside normal space-time. "Which explains why conventional weapons can't touch it," James added, manipulating a holographic display showing the creature's energy patterns. "It's not entirely here in the same sense that we are. The psychic shields were activated as they entered the creature's feeding range. The technology was based on the ancient queen's designs, a lattice of quantum fields that would protect their consciousness from direct absorption. The shields hummed with barely contained energy, and everyone could feel the slight pressure against their minds as the protection engaged. Shield integrity at maximum, Dr. Nakamura reported from the pilot station. We have approximately 58 minutes before the fields collapse. Then we better make those minutes count, Marcus said, unpacking his saxophone. Anna, how about some of those confidence cookies? I think we're going to need them. As they approached the Devourer's outer feeding zone, strange things began to happen to the ship's systems. The lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, and the computer displays showed readouts that shifted between languages, including some that didn't exist. It's trying to interface with our technology, James observed, watching his game development tools spontaneously generating code. The quantum fields of our computers are resonating with its consciousness. Let it, Dr. Kim suggested. Maybe that's exactly what we want. If it's trying to understand our technology, it's getting a sample of how human minds work. Maya had moved to the main viewport and was painting directly on the reinforced glass, creating a mural that seemed to move and shift even as she worked. The colors she used weren't quite right, as if her human perception was being influenced by proximity to the creature. I can feel it, she said without stopping her work. It's curious about us, confused. It's used to consciousness that flows in predictable patterns, but we're like a storm of random thoughts and emotions. Dr. Nakamura was at his meditation station, but instead of seeking inner peace, he was deliberately cultivating mental chaos. He thought about paradoxes and contradictions, let his mind wander through impossible philosophical landscapes, contemplated the sound of one hand clapping, while simultaneously considering whether the answer was purple or Thursday. The effect is working, he reported. I can sense its attention focusing on us, but it's having difficulty processing what it encounters. It's like showing a computer program designed for mathematical equations a piece of abstract art. Marcus began to play, and the music that emerged from his saxophone was unlike anything he had ever created before. The proximity to the Devourer was affecting his perception of sound and rhythm, allowing him to play notes that existed in the spaces between frequencies. The melody was chaos given form, beauty emerging from randomness. Elena set up her portable stage and began performing, but her comedy routine was directed at an audience of one, the cosmic horror outside their window. She told jokes that operated on 17 different levels of meaning, stories that were simultaneously hilarious and profound. Observations about existence that would have made philosophers weep. What's the difference between a cosmic horror and a bad day at work? She called out to the creature. At work you know why you're suffering. Anna was in the galley, creating food that shouldn't have existed. Under the influence of the Devourer's alien consciousness, her culinary abilities had evolved beyond the merely impossible. She was cooking emotions directly, creating dishes that tasted like the feeling of watching a sunset or the memory of a first kiss. David sat in the center of it all, writing in his notebook with furious intensity. Philosophy flowed from his pen like water. Ideas about consciousness and existence and the nature of reality that emerged from the intersection of human thought and cosmic horror. His words seemed to glow on the page, as if the act of thinking about existence in the presence of something so ancient was giving his thoughts physical weight. James had connected his game development tools to the ship's main computer and was creating virtual worlds in real time, each one more impossible than the last. Gravity flowed upward, time moved sideways, and characters existed in states of quantum superposition. The very act of creating these digital impossibilities was broadcasting human creativity directly into the Devourer's consciousness. 30 minutes remaining, Dr. Nakamura announced, though his voice sounded strange, as if the words were arriving from several different directions at once. The Devourer's attention was fully focused on them now. The volunteers could feel its vast consciousness pressing against their shields, trying to understand what it was encountering. But instead of the ordered, digestible thoughts it expected, it was experiencing pure human chaos. Maya's painting was now covering most of the viewport, a swirling masterpiece that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the glass could contain. The artwork was responding to the creature's presence, evolving and changing in real time. "It's trying to communicate," she reported, her voice filled with wonder. "Through the painting. It's never encountered consciousness like ours before. It doesn't understand how we can think in contradictions and paradoxes without going insane." Marcus's music was building to a crescendo that defied musical theory. He was playing harmonies that should have been impossible, rhythms that existed outside of time, melodies that looped back on themselves and created new meanings with each iteration. Elena's comedy had evolved into something that was part performance art, part philosophical discourse, and part pure creative expression. She was making the universe itself laugh while simultaneously questioning the nature of humor in the face of cosmic indifference. "The shields are holding, but barely," Dr. Nakamura reported. "The creature's confusion is actually helping to protect us. It's so focused on trying to understand what we are that it's not actively trying to consume us." Anna's cooking had transcended cuisine and become something approaching alchemy. She was preparing a meal that somehow represented the entire human experience, from the first taste of solid food as a baby to the complex flavors of a life fully lived. Dr. Kim's mathematical instruments were producing equations that solved themselves in impossible ways, theorems that proved and disproved their own premises simultaneously, formulas that calculated the emotional weight of imaginary numbers. 15 minutes, Dr. Nakamura called out, but the announcement seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Devourer was struggling. 13 billion years of existence had taught it to process consciousness like a computer processes data, in ordered sequences with predictable outcomes. But human consciousness was like trying to run poetry on hardware designed for mathematics. David looked up from his notebook, his eyes bright with the intensity of discovery. "It's in pain," he announced. "Not physical pain, but conceptual pain. We're forcing it to experience a type of consciousness it was never designed to handle. We're making it think in ways that hurt." 20 minutes of chaos and we've given a cosmic horror a headache. Elena laughed. That might be humanity's greatest achievement yet. But even as they celebrated this small victory, they all knew the shields wouldn't last much longer. Whatever they were going to accomplish, they had to do it in the next few minutes. The question was, would confusion be enough to stop something that had been consuming galaxies since before Earth's sun was born? They were about to find out. The recruitment process for Operation Chaos broke every military protocol ever written. Instead of fitness tests and psychological evaluations designed to weed out instability, human recruiters actively sought the most beautifully unhinged minds their species had to offer. Maya Chen, a street artist from New Mumbai who painted murals that changed meaning depending on the viewer's angle, received her invitation while hanging upside down from a bridge strut, spray painting a three-dimensional optical illusion of a dragon eating its own tail. The recruiter, a nervous-looking government official, had to shout over the traffic below, "Ms. Chen, your psychological profile indicates a creativity index in the 99th percentile, with a particular talent for nonlinear thinking and reality distortion through visual media." Maya paused in her painting. "Are you offering me a job or diagnosing me with something?" "Both, possibly. We need you to save the galaxy." In Tokyo, Dr. Kenji Nakamura was in the middle of his daily meditation when the offer came. As one of Earth's leading experts on quantum consciousness and the philosophy of existence, his academic papers read like poetry, and his poetry read like mathematical proofs. The recruiter found him sitting in perfect stillness in his garden, apparently staring at nothing. "Professor Nakamura, we have a mission that requires someone who can think about the nature of consciousness while under extreme stress." Kenji opened his eyes slowly. "Is the stress existential in nature?" "Yes, actually. We're going to confront a cosmic horror that feeds on the essence of consciousness itself." "Fascinating. Will there be time for contemplation during this confrontation?" "That's actually the entire point." "I accept." In a basement studio in Detroit, Marcus Rodriguez was laying down a saxophone track that shouldn't have been possible. He was playing in a time signature that mathematically couldn't exist, somehow making music that existed in the spaces between notes. When the recruiter arrived, Marcus didn't even pause in his playing. "Mr. Rodriguez, we need someone who can create beauty in the face of absolute terror." Marcus finished his impossible riff before responding. "Brother, that's literally the definition of jazz." The volunteers who answered the call were unlike any military unit in human history. There was Elena Vasquez, a comedian whose jokes operated on 5 levels of meaning simultaneously. James Wright, a video game designer who specialized in creating virtual worlds that followed no logical rules. Dr. Sarah Kim, a physicist who wrote equations that solved themselves in ways that made mathematics professors weep. Anna Kowalski, a chef who could make food that tasted like emotions. David Thompson, a philosopher who had written a book proving that nothing could be proven. They gathered at Luna Station, humanity's primary spaceport, looking more like the faculty of an experimental arts college than a military expedition. The Galactic Council observers were baffled. "These are your warriors?" asked Commander Thex of the Regellian Navy, his mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement. "They look like they would flee at the first sign of danger." Ambassador Chen smiled. "Commander, I don't think you understand humans very well. These people seek out danger. They court chaos. They take the impossible and turn it into art. Art does not defeat cosmic horrors." "Art is the only thing that has ever mattered in the face of cosmic horror," interrupted Elena Vasquez, who had been eavesdropping. "When faced with the meaningless void of existence, humans don't despair. We tell jokes. We make music. We fall in love. We create meaning out of nothing. That's not just what we do, it's who we are." The mission briefing was unlike anything in military history. Instead of tactical assessments and weapon specifications, the volunteers received philosophical primers and creativity exercises. Dr. Reyes explained the theoretical framework while the recruits passed around snacks that Anna had prepared, each one designed to evoke a specific emotional response. "The devourer processes consciousness like a computer processes data," Dr. Reyes explained. "It expects ordered thoughts, logical progressions, predictable patterns. Human consciousness doesn't work that way. We think in contradictions, paradoxes, and impossibilities. Our thoughts branch and loop and contradict themselves constantly. So the plan is to confuse it to death?" asked James Wright between bites of what Anna called nostalgic cookies that somehow tasted like childhood summers. "The plan is to be ourselves so intensely that we become indigestible," Chen corrected. "The ancient Queen's people sacrificed themselves by giving the devourer exactly what it wanted, pure, ordered consciousness. We're going to give it something it has never encountered before." Maya raised her hand. "What happens if it likes chaos? What if we just make it stronger?" The question hung in the air for a long moment before Dr. Nakamura spoke up. "Then we will have failed beautifully, which is more than most beings can say about their deaths." The ship they boarded was a hybrid of human and galactic technology, designed specifically for this mission. The hull was covered in Maya's artwork, swirling patterns that hurt to look at directly but somehow conveyed hope and defiance. The interior was filled with instruments and tools chosen not for their tactical value, but for their ability to facilitate human creativity under stress. Marcus had brought his saxophone. Elena had a portable comedy stage. James had a computer loaded with reality-bending game environments. Anna had a mobile kitchen that defied several laws of physics. Dr. Kim had mathematical instruments that she claimed could calculate the square root of purple. David had brought nothing but a notebook and a pen, claiming that philosophy needed no tools beyond thought itself. As they prepared for departure, each volunteer recorded a message for Earth. Not last words or tactical reports, but explanations of what they hoped to accomplish. "We're not going to fight this thing," Maya said into the camera, paint still under her fingernails from decorating the ship. "We're going to confuse it so thoroughly that it forgets how to be hungry. The nature of consciousness itself is at stake," Dr. Nakamura added. "We represent the possibility that awareness need not be orderly to be profound." "I'm going to play jazz for a cosmic horror," Marcus laughed. "If that's not the most human thing ever, I don't know what is." The departure was deliberately chaotic. Instead of a formal military send-off, the volunteers threw an impromptu party in the ship's common area. Anna cooked dishes that shouldn't have existed. Marcus played music in impossible time signatures. Elena told jokes that operated on 7 levels of meaning. James created virtual reality environments where the laws of physics were more like gentle suggestions. As Luna Station fell away behind them, the volunteers weren't following any formal mission protocol. They were doing exactly what Chen had hoped they would do, being magnificently, chaotically, impossibly human. The journey to the galactic core would take 10 days. 10 days to prepare not weapons or tactics, but creativity itself. 10 days to become so intensely human that even a 13-billion-year-old cosmic horror would have no choice but to take notice. Dr. Reyes monitored their psychological profiles throughout the journey, watching in fascination as their creativity indices continued to climb. Removed from the constraints and expectations of normal society, freed to be as chaotic and unpredictable as they wished, the volunteers were becoming more human than human. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was exactly what they needed. As they approached the outer edge of the devastation zone, the volunteers gathered for one final meeting. The view through the ship's window showed empty space where solar systems used to be. "Remember," Chen said over the communication channel from his position with the Galactic Council fleet, "you're not there to defeat it. You're there to be something it cannot understand, cannot process, cannot consume. Be chaos, be creativity. Be human." "Copy that," Elena replied. "Time to save the galaxy by being ourselves." The ship accelerated toward the heart of darkness, carrying humanity's strangest weapon, the beautiful madness of human consciousness itself. The emergency session of the United Earth government lasted exactly 17 minutes before descending into what observers would later describe as controlled pandemonium. President Sarah Martinez sat at the head of the virtual conference table, watching her cabinet argue with the kind of passionate intensity that had once convinced aliens humanity was perpetually on the verge of civil war. "You want us to do what?" Defense Secretary Zhang slammed his hand on his desk, causing his holographic projection to flicker. "Chen, with all due respect, this is the most insane plan I've ever heard, and I once approved Operation Rubber Duck." Ambassador Chen's face remained calm on the main screen, though he was broadcasting from a Galactic Council facility 60,000 light-years away. "I know how it sounds, but hear me out. Every military engagement with this devourer has failed, because everyone approaches it with standard tactical thinking. Overwhelming force, strategic positioning, coordinated attacks. The creature has been alive for 13 billion years. It's seen every possible variation of conventional warfare. But what you're suggesting isn't warfare," protested General Hassan from the Mars Defense Command. "It's performance art with nuclear weapons." "Exactly." Chen's enthusiasm was visible even through the quantum communication lag. The ancient Queen's people were the most logical, disciplined species in galactic history. They approached the devourer with perfect order and unity of purpose. And yes, they managed to put it to sleep, but they also fed it their entire species in the process. What if we try the opposite approach? Dr. Elena Reyes, the director of xenopsychology, leaned forward. "Chen, You're talking about deliberately exposing human minds to a creature that feeds on consciousness. Even if your theory about chaos confusing it is correct, we don't know what exposure to that thing might do to human psychology. Actually, we do know, Chen replied. I've been reviewing the classified reports from our first contact protocols. Remember the Vorthon incident 5 years ago? The room fell silent. The Vorthon incident was still classified above most people's clearance level, but everyone in this room remembered it. First contact with a psychic. Species had gone catastrophically wrong when the Vorthons had tried to establish a mental link with human diplomats. The Vorthons described human consciousness as chaotic noise that caused physical pain to experience, Chen continued. They said our thought patterns were so random and contradictory that prolonged exposure gave them the psychic equivalent of migraines. What if that's not a weakness? What if that's exactly what we need? President Martinez had been quiet through most of the argument, but now she spoke up. Chen, I need you to be absolutely clear about what you're proposing. You want to send human volunteers directly into contact with this creature, hoping that our mental patterns will somehow disrupt it? Not just any humans, Chen said. I want to send the most chaotic, unpredictable minds we have. Artists, musicians, comedians, writers, philosophers, game designers, anyone whose job requires thinking in completely non-linear ways. I want to flood that thing's consciousness with pure human creativity and see what happens. That's not a plan, Zhang protested. That's suicide with extra steps. Maybe, Chen admitted. But consider the alternative. The Devourer is accelerating its consumption rate. At current projections, it will reach the galactic core within 6 months. After that, it will have consumed enough biomass and consciousness to become truly unstoppable. We can either try something unprecedented, or we can watch the galaxy die slowly while fighting a conventional war we cannot win. Dr. Reyes was furiously typing on her tablet. I'm running psychological models based on the Vorthon data. If we're right about chaos being disruptive to psychic entities, the effect would be magnified by having multiple human minds working in parallel, but not in coordination. Like a psychic cacophony. Exactly. Chen's excitement was infectious. And I have an idea about how to amplify that effect. What if we don't just send people to confront the Devourer? What if we have them do what humans do best while they're there? Which is? President Martinez asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. Create. Imagine. Dream. Tell stories. Argue about philosophy. Debate the meaning of existence. Fall in love. Write poetry. Play music. Do all the beautiful, pointless, chaotic things that make us human. Let's turn our greatest weakness into our greatest weapon. General Hassan was shaking his head. You want to send a cultural exchange mission to fight an ancient cosmic horror? I want to send humanity's essence to fight it, Chen corrected. The Devourer feeds on consciousness, but what if it can't digest ours? What if human thought patterns are so chaotic and contradictory that they're like poison to a creature that expects order and predictability? The room erupted in arguments again, but President Martinez noticed something interesting. Despite their protests, her advisors were not immediately dismissing the plan. That was telling. These were pragmatic people who dealt with impossible situations on a daily basis, and they were taking Chen's insane proposal seriously. Dr. Reyes, Martinez called out over the noise. Worst-case scenario. What happens if we're wrong? The xenopsychologist looked up from her calculations. If we're wrong, we lose a small number of volunteers instead of entire fleets. The Devourer continues its advance at the same rate it would have anyway. From a purely mathematical standpoint, the risk-reward ratio is actually favorable. And best-case scenario? Best case? Dr. Reyes smiled grimly. Best case, human consciousness is so incompatible with the Devourer's feeding mechanism that contact with us disrupts its entire biological process, maybe even damages it. Defense Secretary Zhang had been listening to this exchange with growing alarm. You're all talking about this like it's actually possible. We don't even know how to get close to that thing without being consumed. Actually, we do, Chen said. The Galactic Council has been analyzing the Ancient Queen's records. She left detailed instructions for creating psychic shields that can protect against the Devourer's direct consumption effect. The shields won't last long, maybe an hour at most, but that might be enough. An hour to do what? Martinez asked. An hour to be human, Chen replied simply. An hour to show this ancient horror something it has never seen before in 13 billion years of existence. Something so beautiful and chaotic and unpredictable that it doesn't know how to process it. The arguments continued for another 3 hours, but Martinez could see the momentum shifting. Despite the plan's apparent insanity, it had one crucial advantage over every other proposal. It played to humanity's strengths instead of trying to compete with older, more militarily advanced species. Finally, she called for quiet. "Chen, if we approve this mission, what would you need?" "Volunteers," he said immediately. "The best and brightest of human creativity. People who think outside every box we've ever invented. And I need them here at the Galactic Core within 2 weeks. That's barely enough time to get ships there, let alone mount a proper mission. The Devourer won't wait for us to be ready," Chen pointed out. "Besides, maybe being unprepared is exactly what we need. The more spontaneous and chaotic this mission is, the better our chances." Martinez looked around the table at her advisors. She saw fear, doubt, and incredulity, but she also saw something else, hope. For the first time since the crisis began, someone was proposing a plan that didn't involve accepting massive casualties and hoping for the best. "Motion to approve Operation Chaos," she announced. "All in favor?" The vote was closer than she expected, but it passed. Humanity was about to attempt something that had never been tried in the history of galactic civilization. They were going to save the universe by being themselves. "God help us all," Zhang muttered as the session ended. "God." Martinez replied, "Might be exactly who we need for this one." The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 1,000 worlds screamed at each other in languages that hurt to hear, their translator devices sparking from overuse. At the center of it all sat Ambassador Chen Wei, the lone human representative calmly sipping tea from a thermos while the galaxy burned around him. Silence. The voice of Archon Velthar boomed through the chamber, his crystalline form pulsing with authority. The ancient being had ruled the council for 3 millennia, and his word was law. The cacophony died to whispers, then nothing. "We face extinction," Velthar announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute despair. "The Devourer has awakened." Chen raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had heard whispers of this creature during his 5 years as Earth's ambassador, but always dismissed them as superstition. The galaxy was full of old wives' tales about ancient horrors sleeping in the void. A holographic display materialized above the council floor, showing a sector of space that Chen didn't recognize. At first it looked empty, just the usual scatter of stars and nebulae. Then the image zoomed in, and Chen's teacup slipped from his fingers. Something impossible hung in the darkness between stars. It was enormous beyond comprehension, easily the size of a gas giant, but it was alive, organic. The creature's hide rippled with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. Tentacles the size of small moons drifted lazily through the vacuum, and at its center was a mouth that could swallow entire solar systems. "The Devourer," Velthar continued, "is older than our civilizations, older than most of our species. It feeds on the life force of entire worlds, growing stronger with each planet it consumes. 13 billion years ago, it nearly destroyed all life in this galaxy. Only the sacrifice of the ancient queen and her people managed to put it into hibernation." The display shifted, showing worlds that had once been green and blue now reduced to lifeless husks of rock and metal. The creature had consumed their very essence, leaving behind nothing but empty shells. "How many worlds has it taken?" asked Senator Vex of the Andorian Republic, her reptilian features pale with fear. 47 systems in the past 3 days, Velthar replied. "And it's accelerating. Our military forces cannot even slow it down. Entire fleets have been absorbed into its biomass, making it stronger." Chen finally found his voice. "What stopped it before?" "You mentioned an ancient queen?" The chamber fell silent. Even Velthar seemed to struggle with the memory. "Queen Zareth of the Eternal Empire. She was the most powerful psychic in galactic history, capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level with her mind alone. When the Devourer first emerged, she and her entire species linked their consciousness together and used their combined psychic power to force it into a hibernation that was supposed to last forever." "What happened to them?" Chen asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "They died. All of them. The psychic strain killed every member of their species instantly. Trillions of beings sacrificed themselves to save a galaxy they had never seen. The weight of that sacrifice hung heavy in the chamber. Chen tried to imagine an entire species choosing death to save strangers, and found he couldn't quite grasp the magnitude of such a decision. Our scholars have been studying the ancient records, Velthar continued. The Queen left behind detailed notes about the Devourer's nature. It feeds on life force, yes, but more specifically, it feeds on the patterns of consciousness that make each species unique. The more complex and diverse the consciousness, the more it gains from consuming it. So why is it awake now? Demanded General Crix of the warrior clans, his forearms clenched into fists. We believe it was the expansion of galactic civilization itself that triggered its awakening. As more species developed space travel and spread across the galaxy, the combined psychic noise of our thoughts and dreams gradually eroded the barriers the Queen put in place. It sensed the abundance of life and consciousness, and hunger overcame even the Queen's powerful binding. Chen leaned forward in his chair. As the newest member of the galactic community, humanity often felt out of place among species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. But something about this situation felt familiar, like a puzzle he had solved before. "Tell me about this Queen," he said. "What made her so special?" Velthar's crystalline form flickered, displaying what Chen assumed was the equivalent of confusion. She was the ultimate expression of her species' evolution. Completely logical, perfectly disciplined, capable of controlling every aspect of her consciousness with absolute precision. Her people had eliminated chaos from their minds entirely. Eliminated chaos, Chen repeated slowly. They removed all randomness, all unpredictability from their thinking. Of course. Chaos is inefficient. Random thoughts are wasteful. The Queen's people had evolved beyond such primitive mental patterns. Chen stood up abruptly, causing several representatives to flinch. Humans had a reputation for being unpredictable, which made most galactic citizens nervous. "You're going about this all wrong," he announced. "You're trying to fight this thing the same way the Queen did, with order and discipline and perfect control. But what if that's exactly what it expects?" "Human Chen," Velthar said carefully, "this is not the time for your species' legendary impulsiveness. We need careful planning and precise execution." "No," Chen said firmly. "You need the one thing your perfect Queen couldn't provide. You need chaos. You need madness. You need something so completely unpredictable that even a 13-billion-year-old cosmic horror won't see it coming." The chamber erupted in protests and arguments, but Chen ignored them all. He was thinking about humanity's greatest strength, the thing that had allowed them to survive everything from ice ages to nuclear wars to the discovery that they were far from alone in the universe. Humans were gloriously, magnificently insane. While other species had evolved toward order and predictability, humans had somehow managed to become more chaotic and unpredictable the more advanced they became. They wrote poetry about their own mortality, created art that served no practical purpose, and made decisions based on emotions that defied all logic. And maybe, just maybe, that beautiful madness was exactly what the galaxy needed. "I need to make a call to Earth," Chen announced over the shouting. "I think it's time for humanity to save the galaxy by doing what we do best." "Which is?" Velthar asked. Chen smiled, and it was not a reassuring expression. "Something completely insane.